Okay, so today we are gonna be comparing M109A7 Paladin to a Mars pattern Basilisk to see how they stack up to each other and which one is superior. This video shall be split into two parts. First part shall be me analyzing both of them in 8 different categories, those being speed, firepower, armor, crew survivability / comfort, fire control systems and accuracy, reliability, logistical needs, and finally price. And then once I'm done comparing them in all of these categories, I'll explain to you why just looking at the stats doesn't present you with the whole picture, and why both Basilisk and the Paladin are the way that they are. Okay, with all of that said, let's just get into it. First comes the speed. Paladin is capable of moving at 61 km per hour on-road and 50 to 60 km per hour off-road. Basilisk on the other hand is only capable of moving at 35 km per hour on-road and 21 km per hour off-road. Nothing more really needs to be said, Paladin easily wins this category. Next comes the armor. Starting off with the Basilisk, it has 100mm of plasteel for the superstructure, 150mm of plasteel for the hull, and 60 for the gun shield. Now, since it's my belief that plasteel is about 2 times as powerful as conventional steel, you would actually have to double all of these stats to see actually applicable figures, meaning that the real armor values would be 200, 300, and 120mm of conventional steel. When it comes to Paladin, its armor is substantially worse, only being able to protect you from rifle rounds and shell fragments. However, the Paladin does have the entirety of the crew compartment protected by plate, whilst the Basilisk only protects the front, meaning that the Basilisk would be way more vulnerable to counter battery fire. And yes, I am aware of the existence of the Hades pattern Basilisk, but it's just that, Hades pattern. It's not standard nor common across the galaxy. So in conclusion, I'm like really torn between giving the win to the Basilisk, since it obviously has way more armor, or giving it to the Paladin since it uses its armor way more efficiently, in order to combat most likely threats to the crew, aka shell fragments. But in the end, I think I'll have to call it a draw, with the Basilisk having a slight edge, aka getting half a point. Okay, next up we have the firepower section. Starting off with the Paladin, it utilizes a 155mm howitzer that, depending on the shell type, can hit its target anywhere from 18 to 40 km away. The 155 ammo is also extremely accurate, with dumb munitions having an accuracy of 250 meters, PGK GPS guided munitions having an accuracy of 30 meters, and fully guided Excaliburs having an accuracy of less than 2 meters. It does also have a crew served M2, but if it ever comes to the situation where the usage of that thing is warranted, the situation is not terrible, it's catastrophic. Now, Basilisk on the other hand is way more complicated. In my source, the Imperial Armor Volume 1, it states that the Basilisk can only reach targets 15 km away, whilst the wiki on the other hand states that the max range provided in the Tactica Imperialis is 100 km. Now, I don't have that book, so I can't fact check it, but even if I did, it wouldn't really prove anything. The book covers the Sabbath Worlds Crusade, and we are not shown gravity figures for each of the worlds that the Imperial Guard fought upon. It could very likely be that the Basilisk is in fact able to reach 100 km, but only on low gravity planets. And that would make sense, since Battlefleet Kronos, which came out 6 years after the Tactica Imperialis, puts the range of the Basilisk at 20 km. And if you really think about it, all of this kinda checks out, since the range of the Paladin's 155 and that of the Bass is 132 should be on par with each other due to the superior gunpowder of the 41st millennium, even though Paladin has a barrel diameter that's 23mm larger to that of the Basilisk. When it comes to ammunition, Basilisk only carries 20 rounds of ammo for the Earthshaker and 500 rounds for the Bolter. The Paladin carries slightly more, with 39 rounds for its main cannon and 500 to 600 rounds for the MG. Next, when it comes to explosive potential of their HE shells, there are no direct numbers for the Basilisk, but considering that it's stated that one direct hit can destroy an entire Lehman Russ, I would guess to say that they are pretty similar in that department as well. And finally, when it comes to muzzle velocity, Paladin is slightly better, with its 827 meters per second compared to the Bass's 814 meters per second. And lastly, when it comes to the accuracy of the Basilisk, it's stated that it's not the best, usually requiring forward observers to guide the vehicle to its target and requiring quite a few attempts in order to hit it. That is also the reason as to why it's often highly important to have several dozen SPAs all firing in unison. An entire barrage is way more effective at clearing time time-sensitive targets than one vehicle could ever hope to be. And this gets into like doctrine and differences between is it better to saturate the target whilst leaving yourself exposed to counter battery fire, or is it better to fire few advanced munitions and then scurry away before the enemy has time to retaliate. I'll stop here because these are the things that I'll be talking about in the second half of the video. All in all, firepower section for the most part is a draw, with the Paladin having a slight edge due to its more varied ammunition types, giving it further range and accuracy. Next up we have the crew survivability/comfort. When it comes to Basilisk, it has a crew of 4, of which 2 are seated inside the vehicle, those being commander and the driver, whilst the loader and the gunner sit on the main fighting platform, obviously leaving them exposed to artillery fragments, small arms, and even basic elements such as snow, rain, or summer heats. It's also kinda unexplained where does the loader retrieve these shells and powder charges from. It's kinda implied that they are placed inside the vehicle where they are best protected, which would mean that after each shot, loader would have to go to the commander's turret hatch to ask for another shell and powder charge to be provided to him, which, as you can probably guess, would be incredibly fatiguing and slow. He could maybe stockpile these shells on board of the fighting compartment, but that would just be a disaster waiting to happen. Even a singular shrapnel hit to the shell stockpile would break the Basilisk into million tiny bits, possibly even causing a chain reaction due to Imperium preferring to use bases in groups. The way that most 3D modelers get around this is by making up an ammo storage box directly below the breach, which for obvious reasons couldn't work since the breach would constantly be getting in the way and needing to be put into horizontal position, obviously further reducing the fire rate. Paladin on the other hand has all of its 6 crewmen inside the vehicle where they can enjoy the luxuries of cooling and heating systems, while simultaneously not having to go get soaked whenever it starts to rain. The vehicle also has internal Kevlar liner to reduce shrapnel spalling. After that, the A6 and A7 are equipped with high-speed sensors that can detect a flash or fire in milliseconds, and then go ahead to extinguish it, making blowouts highly unlikely. The Paladin can also be pressurized and made to withstand chemical, biological, or nuclear threats, which the exposed crew of the Basilisk cannot. I could go on and say how Paladin's shoot and scoot methods of fighting make it extremely unlikely to get hit, but that again goes into doctrine, which we shall talk about later. All in all, I think that when it comes to crew survivability and comfort, the Paladin takes an easy W. Next up, we have fire control systems and accuracy. First, let's cover the Paladin. Paladin can acquire targets via forward observers, UAVs, or specialized radars. From then on out, this data is digitally sent to the Paladin's onboard computer via a secure radio link. This computer automatically calculates the ballistic solution. It accounts for wind, air temperature, propellant temperature, and even the wear and tear of the gun tube, which can affect muzzle velocity. The computer also tells the crew exactly which projectile and how much gunpowder they should use in order to hit their target. After this, the gunner hits a button and the electric drive system automatically turns the turret and elevates the barrel to the required angle. In order to achieve all of this, it can use both internal navigation system INS and GPS, so that it can know exactly where on Earth and which way it's pointing, even down to a millimeter. And no, GPS and INS are not the same. Whilst both determine position, velocity, orientation, they operate differently. The INS is a self-contained autonomous system using motion sensors to calculate movement without external references. Conversely, GPS, global positioning system, relies on satellites. From then on out, crew attach a fuse which can be impact, delay, or GPS guided. They then place the shell on the loading tray and either use hydraulic or powered assist rammer to shove the shell into the breech. And lastly, one or more green powder charges are placed into the gun, one final data verification check is performed, and the munition is ready to go. And I have already stated the accuracy measurements previously in the firepower section, but to remind you, they are 250 meters for the munitions, 20 for the GPS guided munitions, and 2 for Excalibur rounds. When it comes to Basilisk, its systems are way less advanced. Usually an HQ vehicle is provided to a Basilisk formation, which takes information from the forward observers via the Vox, and then it guesses the rough location and distance from the enemy, after which this information is passed down to the machine's cogitators, which take into account wind, distance, temperature to best lay the guns on their target. Now of course it's nowhere near as good at doing this as a Paladin, since Paladin has way more data points and collects them from only one vehicle. vehicle, whilst the Bas's command HQ has to greatly generalize things like wear and tear, but it's better than nothing. That being said, if the Basilisk is firing alone, which almost never happens due to Imperial doctrine, then it would have to rely on pre-calculated firing tables, which don't take any external factors into consideration and as such significantly affect the accuracy of the gun. After which the gunner has to use heavy iron hand cranks and gears to traverse the platform and elevate the barrel to its desired elevation. And if the horizontal traverse ain't enough, the driver might have to turn the vehicle a bit. In a standard Basilisk, there is also no autoloader. A loader, or an Ogryn if you are lucky, physically hauls the shell, weighing roughly 34 kilograms, into the breech. Then they literally use a staff rammer, which is a long pole pushed by two men to seat the shell into the grooves of the barrel. After which a powder bag is inserted, a quick prayer to the Emperor is ushered, and the shell is good to go. When it comes to accuracy, no direct stats exist, but if I had to guess, it would probably be 250 meters with the command HQ and 400 to 500 meters without one. It would also depend upon the wear and tear of the machine, conditions of the planet and so on, but I think that these figures are a good baseline estimate. When it comes to rate of fire, Paladin can achieve 4 rounds per minute for about 3 minutes before the crew gets exhausted. Basilisk on the other hand can apparently achieve 3 rounds per minute. And yeah, I call rubbish, this is just pure Imperial propaganda. There ain't no way that even with Ogryns and perfect weather conditions, Basilisk can achieve the rate of fire comparable to that of the highly automated Paladin. At best it would be 1 to 2 rounds per minute, and even that is pushing it. So in conclusion, I think it's pretty clear that Paladin wins this category as well. Next up we have the reliability. Starting off with the Paladin, there is an enormous difference between A6 and A7 Paladins. A6 was a nightmare vehicle to work upon since it didn't share almost any parts with any other vehicle and required its own logistical chain. A7 on the other hand is standardized to share as many parts with Bradley as possible. It's also made with modular fixing in mind. First, you go to your onboard diagnosis computer, which tells you where exactly the problem is located. After which you can simply unscrew and pull the unresponding module out and replace it with a new one. The other one would be sent back to the specialized factory or an FOB in order to be repaired and put back into action if possible. And finally, if the entire engine, aka the power pack, dies, the A7 is designed for a fast swap. A recovery vehicle can lift the entire front deck, pull the engine/transmission out as a single block, and drop a new one in. A trained team can do this in under 4 hours in field conditions. And finally, it uses electric motors instead of hydraulics for better reliability and battle readiness. All in all, Paladin is quite a reliable vehicle, but it has nothing on the Basilisk, whose parental vehicle type, the Chimera, can go months without needing any repairs. Now, Basilisk is of course not as reliable as Chimera. For instance, it uses hydraulics for elevation of its main gun, which can freeze or leak and require near constant checkups. But at least when it comes to the chassis, it has proven to be quite reliable. Where it struggles a bit is maintenance. In order to remove track covers and fix or replace broken pieces of track, you would have to remove like 50 different rivets and several dozen heavy plates of plasteel, which would all be highly time intensive and require several power tools, which for an SPA is not as big of a deal as it is on like a tank or an APC. Also, in order to reach the engine and the transmission, you would need to do much the same, requiring a substantial time investment. But it is not all bad, since Chimera is the most common vehicle type in the Imperium and the Basilisk uses its chassis, the spare parts are almost never an issue. Quite on the contrary, since Chimeras are way more prone to losses than SPAs like Basilisk, the artillery branch is usually overflowing with spare parts, which is not always the best thing, since when there are no other vehicles available, the Basses are often used as infantry support guns, the role that they are quite ill suited to. So all in all, I'd say that this one is a clear draw, with the Paladin being easier to fix and the Bass having much better mechanical reliability. Next up, we have the logistical needs. A7 Paladin carries nearly twice as many rounds as the Basilisk, being 39 to 20, meaning that for the Basilisk to match the same artillery volume as the Paladin, it would require another vehicle to to follow it, which is commonly stated in the lore to be the case. Next, when it comes to fuel efficiency and range, the Basilisk should be comparable to the Lehman Russ. It's 20 tons lighter but also has a weaker engine type, meaning that it has an operational range of 250 km on-road and 100 km off-road, but its fuel efficiency can be up to 0.3 liters of fuel per kilometer if you use high-grade Imperial fuel, that is. Paladin, on the other hand, has an operational range of 300 km on-road and 150 to 200 km off-road, but its fuel efficiency is significantly worse, requiring 1.8 liters of fuel per kilometer. So Paladin is better equipped for shoot and scoot missions, whilst the Bass is more suited for more static tactics. All in all, I'd say that this category is a draw, with the Bass having a slight edge due to its massively better fuel efficiency. And finally, we get to the last category, that being the price. The Paladin costs about 10 million bucks to make. Now, when it comes to Basilisk, on the other hand, there are no given numbers, so we are just gonna have to guess. Considering that in one of my previous videos I calculated that the Russ would cost some 100k for the Imperium to produce, and that Basilisk is most likely about 2 to 3 times as expensive, I think that a rational figure for the Basilisk sits at about 300k. That being said, these numbers are kind of misleading since Imperium is a galactic empire with the resources of half the galaxy operating on wartime economy, whilst the USA is just a singular country on planet Earth, so they are not really all that comparable. Still, even with that aside, Bass should still be several times cheaper than the Paladin since it uses mostly riveted design and plasteel, which is way easier to work with than steel. So Bass wins this category, meaning that the final result is 3.5 to 2 in favor of the Paladin, making it a clear winner. And now let me tell you why just looking at the stats doesn't really present you with the whole picture, and why both Basilisk and the Paladin are the way that they are. First, let's remind ourselves which opponents are the Paladin and the boss expected to fight. For the Paladin, it's near-peer opponents that mostly use columns of 1 to 2 tanks and 2 to 3 squads carried by APCs in order to capture areas of significance such as small towns or villages. In these operations, windows of opportunity might only be 10 to 15 minutes in which Paladin would have to get into position, accurately shoot 1 to 2 rounds and change position as to avoid counter battery fire. Basilisk, on the other hand, is mostly expected to fight Tyranids, Orcs and Rebel PDF, all of whom either don't have any counter battery assets or their counter battery assets can easily be neutralized by the Imperium's own artillery. Orcs don't have almost any indirect artillery assets, and the ones that they do possess are so inaccurate that they are of no real threat. PDF only have a limited number of such assets alongside their crews not being proficiently trained in their usage, making it shockingly easy for the guard to win counter battery duels. Now, I already hear the counter arguments of why are they then putting any armor on the Basilisk at all if it's not required, and the answer to that is simple. Just as every military throughout human history has struggled with urban warfare, so does the Imperial Guard. Urban warfare is incredibly costly, especially when it comes to manpower losses. The pool of guardsmen may be large, but it's not infinite. As such, Basses are often used as infantry support guns, blowing up buildings block by block and leaving nothing but rubble behind. Similar to what Russia did in Chechnya and the IDF does in Gaza. This threat is incredibly effective and does leave your more mobile units such as tanks and APCs alongside a large portion of your infantry free to do whatever they please. But it's not always used, since Imperium might declare manufacturing or residential areas as too hard to rebuild and sacrifice of millions of guardsmen to be worth it. Also, Imperium prefers the wars of attrition, so building 2 Mars pattern Basses is considered more useful to them than just building 1 Hades pattern. Also, let's take some monetary analysis of their targets. Paladin's targets of choice are mostly tanks and APCs that can cost millions to make and present a small profile, so spending 100k on a precise Excalibur round just makes sense. Basilisk, on the other hand, targets Orcs and Tyranids, where accuracy is of no concern, since even if you blindly fire at their vague direction, you are bound to hit something. Also, Orc vehicles and Tyranid bioforms cost approximately 4 to 5 Chuck E. Cheese bucks on a high-end to produce, so spending 100k to hit an Orc bus doesn't really make much sense. Okay, closing remarks. Both of them are made for fundamentally different wars and different enemies in mind. Neither is inherently more superior to the other. Basilisk is the best SPA for the Imperium and the Paladin is the best fit for the US. success. Okay, that would be it from me. If you liked this video, remember to smash the like button, comment your thoughts in the comment section down below. Until the next time, I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. Goodbye.